The phone hit the floor of the hospital corridor so hard it skidded under the supply cart, and nobody moved to pick it up. Not the man who dropped it, not the two nurses who saw it happen, and certainly not the woman in the gray maintenance uniform who was mopping 6 feet away. She had heard everything, everyone had. Diane Regional Medical Center, named after the town, not a person, sat at the edge of Barrie, Ontario, where the strip malls gave way to trees and the winters came early and stayed too long. It was the kind of hospital where the staff knew each other by first name, where the overnight crew left coffee in the break room for the morning team, and where the maintenance staff were considered, by most people, to be part of the furniture. Her name was Lenny. At least, that's what the name tag said. She had been working the East Wing for 3 weeks, showed up at 5:47 every morning, signed in with maintenance, wheeled her cart to the 3rd floor and cleaned, methodically, quietly. She knew where every electrical panel was, which hallways had ceiling tiles that let in draft, which supply closet had been reorganized incorrectly for the past 6 months. She said very little. She listened to everything. The staff assumed she was a contract worker brought in by the cleaning company. She wore the same gray uniform as the others. She refilled paper towel dispensers and mopped around people's feet and emptied the biohazard bins without complaint. When someone left a mess in the staff lounge, she cleaned it. When the charge nurse on 3rd floor needed someone to wipe down the consultation rooms before a departmental review, Lenny was the one who did it, twice. Because the first time the nurse said the smell of the cleaner was too strong. She wiped it down again and said nothing. The man who dropped the phone was named Gage Whitmore. He was 34, recently promoted to Director of Operational Services, and he had been at Diane Regional for 11 months. He wore the lanyard like a badge of honor, not in a quiet way, but in the way of someone who wanted you to notice the title printed on the card attached to it. He was the type of man who walked into rooms already talking, who interrupted people mid-sentence without registering that he'd done it, who used the phrase moving forward in contexts where it meant nothing. The woman beside him that morning was not his wife. Her name was Sloane Everhart. She worked in HR, 2 floors below him, and their relationship was the kind of open secret that everyone in the hospital knew about and nobody spoke of directly. Sloane was sharp-tongued in a way that she mistook for wit. She had an opinion about everything and shared it regardless of whether it had been requested. She had opinions about Lenny. Not specifically, she didn't know Lenny's name, or care to. She had opinions about the maintenance staff in general, expressed freely, in the way people speak when they believe the people around them aren't worth considering. It started on a Tuesday. Lenny was mopping near the window at the end of the 3rd floor corridor when Gage and Sloane turned the corner. Gage was on his phone. Sloane was 2 steps behind him, carrying his coffee in hers, explaining something about a staffing grievance with the kind of agitated energy that suggested she'd been explaining it for a while and he hadn't been listening. She stopped when she saw the wet floor sign. "Are you serious?" she said. Not a question, a complaint directed at the air, at the inconvenience, at the universe. Lenny paused her mopping. "I'll be done in a few minutes," she said. "You can go around through the east stairwell, or I can clear a path." "I'm not going around," Sloane said. "This is the main corridor. You can't just block the main corridor during shift change. I can move to the other end and let you through. Or you could have done this at 6 in the morning, when nobody's actually walking around." Lenny looked at her steadily. "I was on the 2nd floor at 6, then work faster." Gage glanced up from his phone, registered the exchange with the mild interest of someone watching a weather report, and went back to scrolling. Lenny stepped aside. She moved her cart against the wall. She gestured down the corridor. Sloane walked through without acknowledgement. Gage followed, and as he passed he said, not to Lenny, to Sloane, but loud enough that there was no ambiguity about whether it was meant to be heard, "They really will hire anyone these days." He was still looking at his phone when he said it. Lenny did not respond. She waited until they had rounded the corner. Then she picked up her mop, repositioned her cart, and finished the corridor. She worked the same way she always did, careful, thorough, unhurried. When she was done, she marked it on her clipboard and moved to the next section. But she made a note. The second incident was on a Friday. Lenny was replacing a ceiling tile near the nursing station when Sloane came to find Gage, who was standing at the station reviewing a roster with one of the floor managers. Sloane pulled him aside to discuss something about the upcoming board presentation, vendor contracts, scheduling, something that had gone sideways. Lenny came down from the stepladder. She folded it, carried it back toward her cart. She passed within 4 feet of them. Sloane lowered her voice, but not enough. "Does it not bother you," she said to Gage, "that someone like that has access to every floor? No background check, no clearance, just a mop and a uniform." "The company runs their own checks," Gage said, half paying attention. "I'm just saying there's a level of professionalism expected at a facility like this. Not everyone clears the bar." Gage did not disagree. He made a sound that meant "you're probably right" and moved on. Lenny signed out for the day at 3:58 and stopped at the security desk to let them know that the supply closet on 3 had a water leak developing behind the left shelf unit. The desk attendant said he'd log it. She said thank you and left. That evening, she wrote a second note. The third incident was the one that everyone later referred to, in quiet conversation as the moment things shifted. It was a Wednesday morning 2 days before the end of Lenny's third week. There was a case review scheduled on the third floor, a formal one, attended by department heads, a couple of board members, and the hospital's executive team. The kind of meeting that required the rooms to be spotless and the hallways to be clear. Lenny had been there since 6, making sure of it. At 8:15, Sloane came in ahead of the meeting. She was dressed differently than usual, formal, deliberate, the kind of outfit worn when someone is performing for a room full of people who outrank them. She stopped at the supply cart in the hallway. "This needs to be moved," she said. "The board members are coming through in 20 minutes. I'll have it cleared before then," Lenny said. "No, I mean now. Move it now. Put it in the stairwell." "I can't leave it in the stairwell. That's a fire code." "I didn't ask for a lecture," Sloane said, her voice clipping at the end of the sentence. "I asked you to move the cart. Can you do that one simple thing, or do I need to find someone else?" There were 3 nurses at the station. A resident sitting nearby filling out paperwork. The desk attendant near the elevator. Every single one of them had gone very still. Lenny looked at Sloane. She held her gaze for 2 full seconds. Calm, completely calm, the kind of calm that comes not from suppression but from certainty. "I'll find a compliant location," she said. "It'll be out of the corridor before 8:30. She moved the cart to the equipment bay 2 doors down. A perfectly acceptable location, fire code compliant, hospital protocol compliant, and continued her work. Sloane watched her do it, then walked toward the meeting room without another word. The case review started at 9. The department heads filed in, the board members, the legal representative from Hamilton, and then the hospital's chief executive officer. The person who had held the position for the past 6 years, who had overseen the facility's last 2 expansions, who had been the one to push through the new emergency wing when the provincial funding almost fell through. She walked in wearing a charcoal blazer, her hair pulled back, a binder under one arm. She sat at the head of the table. Her name was not Lenny. Her name was Dr. Elowen Chaston. Lenny had been a nickname, her middle name, the one she'd gone by since childhood, the one she put on a temporary name tag when she wanted to spend 3 weeks walking the floors of her own hospital without anyone adjusting their behavior for the title. She had done it before. Once in her first year, once after a staff complaint she couldn't trace. She had learned more in 3 weeks with a mop than she could have learned in 6 months of management meetings. She had learned quite a bit this time too. The meeting ran until 11:30. At noon, Gage Whitmore received a message from the Chief of Human Resources. Not Sloane, the actual chief, the one 2 levels above her, asking him to attend a meeting at 2 o'clock in the executive suite. No subject line, no detail. He spent his lunch break telling himself it was about the vendor contracts. Sloane received a similar message 45 minutes later. She told herself the same thing. The executive suite was on the 5th floor, which had a different quality of light than the rest of the hospital. Wider windows, higher ceilings, a stillness that felt deliberately maintained. Gage arrived first. He sat in one of the chairs outside the conference room and straightened his lanyard. Sloane arrived 4 minutes later. She sat down beside him and they exchanged a look that said, "We're fine. We're definitely fine," in the way people do when they're not sure they're fine. The door opened at 2:15. Inside, Elowen Chaston seated at the table. The Chief of Human Resources Ian Sato, beside her with a folder, the hospital's legal counsel at the far end, and on the table a small recording device. Not running, just sitting there, which Gage and Sloane both saw at the same moment. Elowen did not stand when they entered. She waited until they had sat down, until the door had closed behind them, and then she said, simply, "I've been on the 3rd floor since May 5th. Gage went still. Sloane's face did something complicated. "I want to explain what that means," Elowen said, "because I think there may be some confusion." She opened the binder in front of her. She did not need to consult it. She had memorized everything in it, but the act of opening it did something to the room. It established the register of the conversation. This was not informal, this was documented. "My name tag," said Lenny. "That's what I go by when I do this. I work a standard maintenance shift for approximately 3 weeks, every 18 months or so, in a different wing of this hospital. I do it because I believe in understanding what this place actually is, not just what it looks like on paper." She looked at Gage. "I was on the 2nd floor when you made your remark about hiring standards. I was replacing a ceiling tile when Sloane expressed concerns about my background check." She looked at Sloane. "I was 6 feet away, neither of them spoke." "I want to be clear about something," Elowen said. "I didn't come here today because of hurt feelings. That's not what this is. What this is a question of character, specifically your character. The way a person behaves when they believe they're not being observed tells you more about who they are than anything they've ever put on a resume. Gage opened his mouth. I'm going to stop you, Elowen said, not unkindly. I know what you're about to say. You're going to offer a context. A bad day, stress, the meeting, something, and I understand that people have bad days. I do, but the incidents I'm referring to were not isolated. They were a pattern, and a pattern tells a story. Ian Sato opened the folder. Gage, Elowen said, your position as Director of Operational Services requires you to model the institutional values of this hospital. That includes how you treat all staff at all levels in every context. What you said in that corridor was disqualifying. Not because I was the one who heard it, but because 3 other employees heard it, and one of them is going to have to work alongside you. She paused. Had to. Gage's lanyard had slid to the side. He didn't fix it. You'll receive your formal notice from Ian this afternoon. We'll discuss severance terms separately. He didn't say anything. His face had gone to a place past protest, somewhere gray and flattened, where everything had already happened and none of it could be revised. Elowen turned to Sloane. You're in a more nuanced position, she said. You didn't initiate the remark about hiring, but you created the environment for it. And your own comments, on more than one occasion, were, let me find the word, dismissive, in a way that I think you've cultivated over time without recognizing it as a problem. Sloane said, I didn't know who you were. Elowen looked at her for a moment. That's exactly the point, she said. The room was very quiet. The way you treat someone should not be contingent on who they are. It should be contingent on the fact that they are. She closed the binder. You're not being terminated today, but you're being removed from your HR position pending a review of your conduct over the past year. Ian will tell you what that process looks like. Sloane nodded. Once, her jaw was tight. I want to be honest with you, Elowen said. Some people go through something like this and it changes them. Some people go through it and it confirms what they already believed, that the world is unfair and the rules are arbitrary and they were singled out for reasons that had nothing to do with their behavior. I can't control which one you are. That part is yours. She stood. The meeting, as far as she was concerned, was finished. Ian will walk you through next steps. If you have questions about my conduct, the weeks undercover, the documentation, the legality, legal counsel is here for that. She picked up her binder. She paused at the door. The person you spoke to in that corridor, she said, without turning around, was an experienced administrator with a doctorate in health systems management and 22 years in public hospitals. She was also, on that particular morning, someone who was doing her job. That was enough. It should always be enough. She left. The news moved through the hospital in the way that significant news always does. Not announced, not broadcast, but carried. In the elevator, at the nursing station. In the break room at the end of the day shift over cups of tea that had gone lukewarm. The nurses on the 3rd floor talked about it. So did the resident who had been doing paperwork near the station the morning of the cart incident. The desk attendant mentioned it to his wife when he got home. Most of them said some version of the same thing. They had noticed something about Lenny. The way she moved through the hospital, careful, observant, unhurried in a way that didn't match the pace of someone who was just trying to get through a shift. But they hadn't known what to make of it. They'd filed it away and moved on. A few of them felt foolish for not putting it together sooner. More of them felt something else. A particular kind of relief that's hard to name. The feeling of being in a place where it turned out someone was paying attention. 2 weeks later, a memo came down from the executive suite. It wasn't about Gage or Sloane. Their situations had been handled quietly, as these things are, in the language of official documentation and closed-door meetings. The memo was about a new initiative. It came from Elowen's office, written in her direct, unornamented style, with no corporate language and no filler. It announced that all department directors at Diane Regional would, over the next 18 months, spend 1 week per quarter working alongside a non-supervisory team in a role outside their usual function. It would not be optional. It would not be symbolic. It would be assessed and documented, and the assessment would form part of their annual review. Understanding this institution requires being in it, the memo read, not above it. At the bottom there was a note. This initiative reflects values this hospital has always held and should have always demonstrated. Beginning now, we will hold ourselves to them. Formally, consistently, and without exception. E. Chastain, CEO of the maintenance cart, was still in the equipment bay on the 3rd floor. It had been there since Lenny put it there on the last morning of her shift, just before the case review. Someone from the cleaning crew had assumed it belonged to someone else, and left it. Eventually it was logged and returned to the supply room on the 1st floor, but for a while it stayed there, a gray metal cart with a clipboard hooked to the side and a spray bottle wedged in the lower rack, while the hospital moved around it, the way hospitals always do, carrying on with the ordinary, necessary, unremarkable business of trying to do things well.